Standing behind me is a highly modified 1997 Series 5 Kitfox, aka the FreedomFox. The wing is actually covered in fabric as well. What is big, however, are these guys right here, these Alaska Bushwheels. For starters, as a former Navy pilot myself, I didn't even know that backcountry flying or bush flying was a thing unless you were up in Alaska, landing on some riverbed in the middle of the National Forest somewhere. That is, however, until I discovered Trent Palmer's YouTube channel and saw this guy, the FreedomFox, flying around on YouTube. This is a Kitfox Series 5, but it's basically kind of sort of like a Series 7. It's powered by a Vortex 915 IS that makes 141 horsepower. It's also turbo injected, has Behringer Aero wheels and brakes with a TKI suspension. Right now we're sitting at 5,800 feet, so this gets about 2,000 feet per minute on the climb rate. This will cruise at 105 miles per hour true, burning about 5.5 gallons, and it will stall at 33 knots. This prop right here is NR prop. It's a 3-bladed carbon fiber prop. What's really interesting is that in the older videos of the FreedomFox, Trent was talking about putting on an MT constant speed prop, and he did, and that lived with him for a good while. But he actually replaced it because for the price, the value, the capabilities, and the characteristics, this is a much better bang for your buck. Moving around to the side of the airplane, you've got the wing here with all the Vortex generators along the side. Beautiful paint job. Moving on to the Flaperons, we'll talk about those here in a second. The other thing to note with this airplane and a lot of other backcountry airplanes like this is that it is completely, well, mostly covered in fabric. Something you really can't gather from watching the videos. Coming out the side of the wing here, you see all these little plastic pieces. These are called VGs, or Vortex generators. They disrupt the airflow, and that allows you to stall at lower speeds. So it doesn't look like much, and they are literally little cheap plastic pieces that you put on by hand, but they actually do work really, really well and really good in the backcountry for getting out of tight spaces. Now, I mentioned that this is a Series 5 Kitfox. Some of you might be thinking this looks like a Series 7. The reason for that is because Trent made a ton of modifications to this from the firewall forward, basically from in front of where your knees and your feet go forward. This is basically a Series 7 STI Kitfox. STI standing for short takeoff. It's a STOL, short takeoff and landing modification. So the firewall is iconic to the new Kitfoxes out the block, not the round cowling that was in the Series 5. But however, if you move to the back of the airplane over here, the tail, and this is a little bit hard to capture in video, is very short. And I'll show you what I mean by that. If I walk up to the aircraft here, you can see this is my shoulder touching the end of the wing and the flaperon. And it is only an arm's distance from the flaperon to the elevators at the back of the tail. Not unsafe by any means, it's just, it has a much bigger front presence than it does a rear presence. One of the things I wanted to point out too, in particular with this airplane, is that it's an experimental aircraft. What do I mean by that? So there are two types of airplanes that exist in the United States, basically. There are experimental and certified airplanes. Certified is what you're probably familiar with if you're not a pilot. Those are the Pipers, the Cessnas, the Cirruses. They're the airplanes that are made at a factory, and you would go to a dealer or buy directly from the manufacturer, the OEM, and you would purchase the airplane. The big thing about certified is who the warranty rests with. The warranty rests with the manufacturer. That's why they're certified. They're certified in the eyes of the FAA. On the other side of the coin, there are experimental aircraft, which as an American is the coolest thing ever that we have this capability. I am actually not well versed on what Canada does or what the rest of Europe does, but in the United States, experimental airplanes are pretty awesome because you as the owner, operator, and a lot of times builder take on that liability for the aircraft, meaning that if you have an accident and you unfortunately pass away or there's a fatality involved, the liability falls on you. So although that might sound scary, what it allows you to do is, especially if you're building your airplane, it allows you to do all kinds of upgrades that would never otherwise even be possible in a certified airplane. For instance, if you own a Cessna 172, to swap the seat cushions out on that airplane or to make an avionics upgrade is not as simple as going to the store and doing it. You have to get permission, literal permission from the FAA in order to swap those components out. However, if you own an experimental airplane like the FreedomFox here, and you wanted to, let's say, go to Napa Auto Parts and get an LED light. Now, I'm not saying he did that for this case, but if you want to do that, you can do that. You have the power to put on your airplane what you deem is safe and appropriate. But if you wanted to get into aviation, then you should really take a look at any experimental airplane, because it gives you this capability of being able to modify your airplane as you, the owner, deem fit, which is pretty sweet. Another really interesting thing about this Kitfox, and any Kitfox in particular, is this guy right here. This is a Flaperon. There are two of them, one underneath each wing, and that's right, I said a Flaperon. So not a flap, not an aileron, but both. It is one flight control surface that is playing the part of two flying control surfaces, the flaps and the ailerons. It is very iconic to Kitfox. It's something you may not recognize if you just look at the airplane for the first time from a distance, but once you walk up to it, you can clearly see there is a 2-inch gap below the wing here and the flaperon. So the flaperon is really interesting because it actually does provide some benefits, which is why Kitfox went with the flaperon in the first place. The first of which is, even when the wing is stalled, it is damn near impossible to stall the flaperon, mainly because the wind will go in two places when it touches the wing. Over top of the wing, obviously, and underneath the wing. When it comes underneath the wing, it actually then hits the angle of attack for the flaperon. So you could have a stalled wing on a Kitfox and not stall that flaperon because the AOA of the flaperon is different. So because of all that, the Kitfox is presumably a very safe airplane, and it is really hard to stall the aircraft. Also very hard to spin the Kitfox as well. All right, I wanted to point out these guys right here. These are called Alaska Bushwheels. I find that an ironic kind of name because it's actually a tire, not a wheel, but these are 29 inches in diameter. They make them all the way up to 35 inches, maybe even bigger for all I know. 35s will be massive. The whole reason that tires like this exist is so that you can land off airport at a place like this where there's not a paved runway necessarily. And these allow you to go over small to medium-sized rocks and basically not damage the airframe. They do have some downsides though, one of which is you can't really see that well from inside the cockpit because they're so high up, and being that it's a tailwheel aircraft, that means you're kind of angled like this, and so their visibility is extremely low over top of the engine cowling to see. Unlike a car where you can, you're kind of sitting level with the hood of the car. If the wheel was put on the front of this airplane, which some pilots lovingly refer to as a training wheel, then it would be much easier to see. And if you've done any sort of flying around where you went to your local flight school and got an introductory flight in a Cessna 172, 99 times out of 100, that is going to be done in a certified nose wheel style airplane. But being as this was designed with a backcountry in mind, this has 29-inch bush wheels for the mains and a tail wheel as well in the back of the airplane. So it's really hard to tell from watching these videos on the internet, but this airplane is not covered in metal. Now, if you've never stepped foot in an airplane or been around an airplane that wasn't a commercial airliner, you might think all airplanes are made of metal, because why wouldn't that be? That's safer and stronger, blah, blah, blah. Well, that's where things get a little bit tricky. In fact, airplanes have been made of fabric, or covered in fabric, should I say, a steel and tube combination for 100+ years. Why would you cover it in fabric? Okay, so there are a couple of reasons to do that. First of which it comes to mind is that it's very light. Light yet durable. The flaperon is the exception to this rule. The flaperon is not covered in fabric, but the main fuselage of the airplane is in fact covered in fabric. Now there's metal beams supporting the structure, and this is a metal grab handle right here. If you have any sort of weather like hail, or if a rock were to hit your airframe on a fabric covered section, the likelihood of it bouncing off and not damaging anything is extremely high. However, if you had a metal covered airplane like a Cessna, when a rock hits that airframe, it is going to leave a dent, obviously. The wing is actually covered in fabric as well. And so because of that, you have two struts right here. A lot of that support and strength that would otherwise come from a metal wing has to be distributed to different sections of the wing. And you can see they attach here to the actual airframe itself inside the wing underneath the fabric. But the fabric, as you can hear, is very much covering the wing. And if you look here, you can see the fabric and how it was applied along the wing. And it's all along this airframe. And also, if something were to happen, if you need to replace a section here, it would not be that hard to take the fabric off and literally recover it, match the paint to repaint it, and it would look like a brand new airplane, because the main body of the airframe, the steel tube inside, was not affected at all. So hopefully that helps clear the air on why you would want to go with a fabric covered airplane. So one of the things I wanted to point out from being next to a Kitfox in person is that it's a lot smaller than you think it is. It looks big from a distance. As you walk up to it, it starts to get a little bit smaller, especially in the cockpit area. I'm 6 foot and I'm not even wearing a headset, and I don't have a lot of wiggle room to spare. I'd probably be okay, but I am all the way back in my seat with my hand on the stick, and it is very tight. especially if I close the door right here. Not a lot of room for baggage. Basically what you can fit back there is what you get. One of the things that I love about this airplane and Kitfoxes in general is the amount of light that comes in through this sunroof. So because this is a plexiglass material right here, you get a tremendous amount of light coming in. Just like a house, if the light comes in, it makes it that much more enjoyable of an experience, which is really a nice touch. Looking at the avionics here in the FreedomFox, we've got dual G3X screens. So these actually are essentially the same piece of instrumentation. It's just one is smaller. This is 7-inch, and this is the bigger one, the 10-inch. Everything is labeled really well, and it's very clean. You can see I've got a nice big red button for the start. The master on, avionics on. This is for the Garmin avionics. This is a level button, autopilot engage, changing the heading feature, altitude select, heading mode, nav mode, vertical speed, and little nozzles here. No air conditioning in this airplane, but it does have a little bit of ram air, so when you're up to altitude, flying at airspeed. And another cool feature is you can actually crack the door open. So now the door is locked right here, but see this little kind of U-shape indentation? You can crack the door open, slide it between there, and now you've got a relatively secure position here. This is why you're strapped in with a harness as well, but you can let in a lot of airflow, which is a really nice feature. I didn't actually realize that it did that. And here's my flap lever along with the trim and AP disc, which is autopilot disconnect switch right there. And there's the fuel selector valve for on or off. Also, there's our fuel quantity indicator. It's actually really useful and it's simple. Right there is a good old-fashioned old school. How much fuel do we got? That's what we got. Okay. So my overall impression with the FreedomFox is that it's a very well built and extremely well modified aircraft. This is the perfect airplane for someone who's looking for a backcountry machine that can take them just about anywhere, and they're not really in a hurry to get there. You know the age-old saying, it's not the destination, it's the journey? I mean, this is the journey. This airplane is the journey. In the purest, simplest definition I can think of, it gives you the ability and the freedom to land anywhere that you would otherwise not be able to go to by car, foot, bike, and certainly not by a lot of other airplanes.
And now it's time to give the FreedomFox a flyby score. This modified Series 5 Kitfox STI is one of the most fun, capable, and well-known STOL aircraft out there. It excels in stick and rudder feel, off-airport capability, and has a cool factor unlike anything else, all while keeping operating costs low thanks to its fuel-efficient Vortex engine. However, it's not ideal for long-distance flying, and as a kit-built aircraft, it's not as turnkey as a certified bush plane like an Aviat Husky or a Cub Crafter's X-Cub. It recently sold for $230,000, making it one of the most expensive Kitfoxes ever. But for the new owner who wanted a one-of-a-kind backcountry airplane with serious STOL performance, it doesn't get much better than this.
All right, well that about wraps it up for me. Just want to give a huge thank you to Trent Palmer for letting me film the amazing FreedomFox. I really hope the new owner enjoys the heck out of it. Until next time, I'm Rob Roy from Flybuyer.com, and I'm out of here. See ya!